Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. Just bad vibes all around from Game 1 up in Chicago. And Cristopher Sanchez said something that, Philly fans are not going to like.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of the other stuff I do in the sports talk radio space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic, doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for over 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for the last 4 seasons, and this is now my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that if you're checking us out in podcast form, you're rating and reviewing. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hey, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the like button. That'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's free. It's super easy to do. It's like 2 clicks, and it helps you out, and it really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. So appreciate everyone who's done that. We're getting closer to 5,000 subscribers to Locked On Phillies. So a lot of people have already made that click. Thank you very much. No thank you to the Phillies last night for their performance up in Chicago in Game 1. It was really rough. We're going to start off talking about that. Then we're going to continue our potential trade segments. We've already run through the Twins. We've run through the Orioles. We have also run through, don't tell me I'm going to get to it, the Guardians. That's right. That's who we did yesterday. Sorry. I got so many trade scenarios floating around up in my head. That's this time of year, right? Trade deadline just a couple days away. So get excited, Phillies fans. There's a lot that can happen positively for this team. There is stuff that can happen negatively for this team. But we're going to look at the White Sox and the Diamondbacks today. One player from each. And you just saw one of them go yard in last night's game. And then we're going to take a look at Game 2 of the series between the Phils and the White Sox. A must-win, bounce-back game for the Phillies. You can't drop 2 out of 3. You can't drop 3 out of 3. Anything. You got to win the series in Chicago. And last night, the Phillies didn't get that done. And it was a rough night all around. It just felt like they slept walk through the game. Now, apparently, I'm just going to throw this out here right off the rip. Some comments from the team, some news from the team was that they had a major delay in travel getting out of New York. It was like a 7-hour travel delay that got them into Chicago late, and that messes stuff up. You remember when they had the late rain-delayed game in Atlanta before heading to St. Louis way back at the start of the season, and then they just absolutely got smoked in St. Louis, right? I know they're not flying coach and everything like that. And I'm not sitting here saying, hey, they should have lost to the White Sox because they got the light. No, you should have won the damn game. But if you're saying, well, see, this is what the team is, no, there may be some external factors that contributed to that. But 6 hits from the offense is not good enough. 2 of those 6 came from Brandon Marsh. So top half of the lineup was extra quiet last night. And the White Sox are one of the worst teams in baseball. That cannot happen. Everybody has a bad game, but you're not going to sit here and be like, oh, that's acceptable. It's not. And they need to bounce back today. So the offense, you saw great things from them in New York. You saw a great performance by them in the final game against Boston. Rough game. And that's the ebbs and flows of a baseball season, but it also shouldn't happen against this quality of opponent. So the offense needs to step up tonight. And this is also proof positive that the bullpen isn't the only thing that needs help at the deadline. I still think the bullpen is the biggest need, but you need to add to the lineup. And we'll talk about a couple of guys who could help that in our second segment today. The other thing that should bother Phillies fans a little bit, not necessarily Cristopher Sanchez's performance. He went out there. He did not throw all that well. Now, he ended up getting the inning count up there a good amount relative to how he threw, but he just didn't seem as sharp. He didn't seem as comfortable, and he said as much after the game. And he talked about the travel day, and he also talked about the humidity. And he said, I just didn't really feel comfortable out there. Now, there's a couple of weird things with this. One, well, why did they not send Sanchez ahead a day they knew he was starting in Chicago? Teams will do that often, where they'll take the starter for Game 1 of the next series. There's no need for him to be in New York for all 3 games. Send him ahead so he's there and settled. So in case anything goes wrong with travel, like the Phillies had, he's already there. I don't know what it was that caused them not to do that here. So I'm not going to totally kill the Phillies for that because, hey, there's always circumstances that we don't know. But still, that was weird. And then the humidity stuff. I mean, it's Chicago. It's not Houston. It's not like middle of Texas or anything. It's not Arizona and all those stadiums are all inside or have the retractable roofs for a reason because it gets really hot down there. Chicago's not exactly the desert. So if you're getting crushed by the humidity up there, and I know it was hot, but we got to be ready for that. It is late July. It is going to be hot in some games. And coming off the mound and saying that and that he felt a little fatigued and things like that were ways that it was said by him, by Rob Thompson after the game. That should bother Philadelphia Phillies fans. It really should, because you're a major league ball player. You're supposed to be mentally tougher than that. There are no excuses for a guy that's a big part of this team, right? And I'm not trying to kill Cristopher Sanchez because he has had and still is having a really great season for them. But I don't like hearing that. And that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on when he makes his next start, if it's hot out, or regardless, to see if he bounces back. Just like how Wheeler's going through right now, a couple starts where he hasn't looked like he had his best stuff. Now we've seen one from Cristopher Sanchez. There is another factor, though, and this is important. Sanchez threw the complete game last time out. A lot of times in modern baseball, these guys are not stretched out to throw 9 innings. Now, whether that's smart or not, that's a debate between traditional baseball folks who watched Cy Young pitch 100 billion games in a row and modern baseball folks who are terrified of arm injuries. Bottom line is the reality of the way these pitchers are handled is they're not day-to-day stretched out to go 9 innings. They just don't do it as much anymore. It's why complete games are down in Major League Baseball significantly more than they were even, 5-10 years ago, right? It has really dropped off to protect pitchers' arms. So when a guy goes out there and he throws a complete game, the next start, your body doesn't quite feel the same. You might be a little bit more tired. Recovery might be a little bit tougher. And that's something the Phillies need to keep in mind as they go deeper into this season and start to prepare for the postseason. Now, anyone who's overreacting to this Cristopher Sanchez start, he's been solid all year. I have no concerns about him going forward. I think he's going to be great still for this team. I still feel awesome about having him as one of the top 2 pitchers on this roster, right? Still in the NL Cy Young conversation, just like Zach Wheeler is. It was just a bad start, and everybody has bad starts. I just didn't like the explanation for it. And if anyone's now calling the Phillies season over because they lost a game to the White Sox, let's slow our roll a little bit, okay? This Philly season has been over like 70 times if you listen to some people. It was not a good game last night, and I'm ticked off, right? Like, you should not ever lose to that team. But this is why we don't go into series expecting sweeps. This is why we go into series saying take 2 out of 3, get the job done. If you have the chance to sweep, take advantage if you can. But winning series is the goal. Anything else is gravy. So if you're looking at that and saying, well, I wasted my time watching that game last night, they were lifeless. Yes, correct. It doesn't mean the team is dead. It doesn't mean you change your trade deadline plans because you lost a game to the White Sox, 1 out of 162. Like, that's just not how this sport works, right? If in football, the Eagles were to lose to like the New Orleans Saints, who are the worst team in the NFL this year, we'd lose our minds, and rightfully so, because there's only 17 of those. But dropping a game to the White Sox does not mean the season's over. And other teams have had bad losses this year. I can find one for every single other contending team. So it didn't feel good. I'm not looking to overreact to it too much. Now, I will say that the lineup's approach looked really rough last night. They did. They were getting themselves out again. It felt like a very 23-24 Phillies performance, like those 2 years where it was home run or bust. And sometimes this happens when a team gets hot, right? There are potential negative side effects to swinging it well. And you might be like, Connor, what are you saying? It's bad if the team's hot? No, but when you're starting to drive the baseball like the Phillies did in New York, also a smaller ballpark, very small ballpark. Some will call it a little league field. Shout out to our friends up there at Yankee Stadium. But like sometimes when you see that and you're lifting the ball and you're like, hey, everything's going out of here. It does get you into bad habits where you're more aggressive at the plate. You're swinging at pitches that you probably would take otherwise, but you're feeling good. You're like, I can hit anything right now. And the next thing you know, you're putting yourself in bad counts. So the tough thing is when you're going bad, it feels like everything's going against you. When you're going good, sometimes you get too aggressive. That's why keeping that middle ground balance of like, hey, every single at bat, every single game of the year, I'm just going to try and put the same approach together. Hunt whatever pitch I like, hunt whatever location I like, work into deep counts. fight stuff off if I have to, right? Like that's a good professional approach. And what makes great hitters versus good hitters versus bad hitters is how often you can stick to that approach. And last night, the Phillies didn't stick to their approach. And we'll see if they can get back to that. But largely this year, they've been pretty good at that. And last night was the anomaly, right? It may not feel like it because this team seems to be they're not stuck in first gear, but they're stuck in like second gear. They just can't really hammer down on the gas pedal and go on this winning streak. And they're going to hit a stretch this year where they win 7, 8, 9 in a row. That's going to happen, especially with some stretches of the schedule that they have in August and September. And hopefully they'll go on a run like that in October and make this real easy, but the postseason ain't easy. My point is this. It's never as bad as it seems. It's rarely as good as it seems. All right, so everyone take a deep breath. Hopefully they'll bounce back tonight. We're going to preview that Game 2 against the White Sox coming up with Jesus Luzardo on the mound, and one of my favorite names in baseball going for the White Sox. But first, we're going to look at a pair of players, one from the Diamondbacks, one from the White Sox. Potential to be traded to the Phillies, high for one of them. Well, high for the other one too. I mean, these are very available players that we'll talk about next, and one of them in Luis Robert, you just saw go yard last night. They better not have been fooled by that. The Phillies, I mean. We'll talk about it as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about Game Day Hue first, though, because Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. I love wearing it on the golf course, the hats, the golf glove. They sent us a couple samples, and man, I wear it all the time. I was wearing my Game Day Hue hat yesterday. I wear them like 2 or 3 times a week, not the golf gloves. I wish I played golf that much. But bottom line is, I can't take these things off because it pairs perfectly with the usual gear that I have for the Phillies. I even went with the maroon hat that fits great with the throwback stuff because a lot of Phillies hats you see, well, it's the typical red. Game Day Hue has the maroon too. They got everything, and it adds to the lineup of your gear that you wear. And it's not gaudy. It doesn't have these major big logos or anything weird on the hat. Like, no, just your team color, sharp looking hat, great material, everything. And again, it's not just the hats. Check out their split shade gloves made for the golf course or the perfect gift for the fan who has everything. Right now, you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. Let your colors talk because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. Go ahead and check them out. Couple of trade scenarios here for you let's start with the White Sox, and then we're going to get into the Diamondbacks. And there was a lot of sketchy news with potential trade partners yesterday. It was just a weird day for trade partners. The good and the bad. The good, depending on how you look at it, was Luis Robert did go yard against Cristopher Sanchez. Now, see, maybe this is looking too much into it. Sometimes you get too into the what you see and not what you don't know. Here's what I mean by that. Luis Robert took Cristopher Sanchez deep. And you might see that as a Phillies fan, be like, see, that's the power that you think about adding to this lineup with a right-handed bat. Don't let that overpower the stats that he's put together all year. Again, just like 1 of 162 against the White Sox shouldn't make you say the Phillies season is over. 1 at bat out of hundreds for Luis Robert this year doesn't undo his bad stats. And I hope the Phillies didn't see that and were like, hey, he's the guy we got to go after now. Because the weird thing about it was he kind of looked like he thought he hit it foul. Like he took the swing and kind of just stood there and kind of looked awkwardly. Like you could tell when guys are like, I don't know where feel like that's out of play. Like the ball's down the line where you're like getting to this, the crowd as far as a foul ball is concerned. And that to me, maybe I'm overstating this, but when hitters who are going good get one, they know. And when you hit one and you don't know, it means you probably haven't been hitting them all that good lately. Or you would have an idea, hey, I just made square contact with that. Timing felt good, everything. He almost looks surprised. If you're trading for a right-handed power bat, I don't want them to look surprised when they hit a ball out of the yard. I also don't want them to have the lowest batting average against fastballs in Major League Baseball. Luis Robert's stats are not good. And some people think okay, if you acquire him from the Chicago White Sox and you make a trade, you say, hopefully better situation leads to better performance. You put him on a winning team, maybe he plays better, plays harder. I don't know. I don't love doing that. I do buy into it, but I don't think it's something that you should rely on. Like Luis Robert for the Phillies is a break glass in case of emergency trade. If everybody else on the market just gets scooped away and Dave Dombrowski finds himself sitting there at the 11th hour, it's like, I got to do something to help this lineup, maybe Luis Robert. But even then, the Diamondbacks have said that their asking price is like a top 10 prospect for a team, which feels heavy for a guy like Luis Robert. Maybe if you go with like prospect number 9 or 10 or something, but it's crazy what they're asking for him. And he's not that good of a player. And frankly, he doesn't really strike me as a guy, from what I've heard, from what I've watched, that is focused in and day out on making the smart, right plays and handling things, like being the true professional, right? And now I don't know. This is an outsider's perspective. So maybe White Sox fans can tell me differently on this. But my impression of Luis Robert is a very risky guy without the stats to back it up that a lot of people will tell you has the tools, right? We've seen it from him before in the past, but we haven't seen it consistently and we haven't seen it recently. So I'm out on Luis Robert. I don't know how anybody could be in on Luis Robert unless it's a like last ditch effort because nothing else worked out. He is the last option for a right-handed bat as far as notable names that I would look at for the Phillies. So then let's talk about the first option, because Luis Robert, well, he probably helped his trade stock by going yard yesterday. Eugenio Suarez, he almost hurt his trade stock, and it wasn't his fault. He was hit by a pitch in his hand, and that is something, fastball too, that people look at and say, oh my God, if the best right-handed bat on the trade market just broke his hand and is out for like a month and a half or something, or has some major issue, what are we doing? We talked about Emmanuel Clase yesterday with the gambling issue that's got him on the leave list for Major League Baseball, and he's probably not going to be moved now. But if Suarez got hurt, damn, man, you might have just seen the top closer and top right-handed bat on the market go down within like a 24-hour stretch, which would be wild. But good news, right? I took an x-ray after the game. X-ray is negative. Did an MRI and a CAT scan, both negative. No breaks for Eugenio Suarez. So he is still on the market. He is still available. And there were a lot of teams around baseball breathing a sigh of relief. It's the only time you'll see like 5 or 6 or 7 unaffiliated teams with a player be like, God, I hope he's healthy. And thank goodness he is. So he's out of the lineup today for the Diamondbacks. They're going to be cautious with him because they want to trade him, because they want to get stuff back for him, because he's on an expiring deal. And that's the thing. Expiring deal means this is a rental. So in theory, he shouldn't cost that much, right? But when you look and you see he's got 36 homers, and that's right where Kyle Schwarber finds himself right now, right? So you've got a guy that basically is right-handed Kyle Schwarber. Now, he doesn't walk nearly as much as Schwarber does. Strikes out a good amount. But he's a true power hitter. That's fine. Like, we've dealt with that before. It's better than guys with no pop that you have down near the bottom of the line. A guy like Max Kepler, a guy like Yohan Rojas, he's an upgrade over them. And I know he plays third base. We'll talk about that in a second, how he could slot in. But where this gets tricky is the Cubs are interested. The Reds are interested. Like, there are a lot of teams that are interested in Eugenio Suarez, and they're willing to pay. And that will bid up the market. So while he is a rental, and you might say, hey, we'll give you, I don't know, Mick Abel and a top 25 prospect in our system, and shake hands, get the deal done. Okay. But what happens when Chicago offers a pitching prospect comparable to Mick Abel or close to Mick Abel, and then like a top 15 prospect? Well, the next thing you know, now you got to go top 10, and 2 top 10 prospects go off. And then the next thing you know, like, that's the thing. If you get in a bidding war for Eugenio Suarez, it could get very, very expensive. So we'll have to see how the market plays out. He's the best right-handed bat power-wise on the market, maybe overall on the market at the deadline. We'll see if the Phils win the sweepstakes. And if they do, how does he fit in? Because the Phillies don't exactly need a third baseman, which is where Eugenio Suarez plays. So what would happen? Well, here would be the ideal situation. Well, I think it would be ideal. You tell me in the comments if you think this would be the right way to handle it. If you play him at third, you move Bohm to first, you move Harper to the outfield. Harper probably plays right, Castellanos probably plays left, or vice versa. But you take away a Gold Glove defender at first base for Alec Bohm, who was not a Gold Glove defender. You move Alec Bohm, who's been solid at third base, to first for Suarez, who is not a plus defender. And next thing you know, you're a minus at third, a minus at first, a minus in left, because Kepler's actually been pretty good defensively. Well, I don't love that. So here's what I would do. I would have Suarez DH. I would keep Bohm at third when he comes back. I would have Harper at first. I would move Schwarber to left field. And I know you might say, I don't want to see Kyle Schwarber in left field. This team went to the World Series with Kyle Schwarber in left field back in 2022. I don't love it, but all you're doing, right, you're taking a significant drop in left field. Third base stays the same. First base is still a plus spot for you. Suarez DHs, he can't hurt you defensively. That's what I would do ideally. Where would you line up the Phillies defensively if they were to acquire Suarez? That's something that the Phillies have to consider. But you find a way with a bat like that. And we'll see if the Phillies are able to get that deal done. If there is a number one position player, because I already told you, Yohan Duran is my number one bullpen arm. If there's a number one position player want for the deadline, it's Suarez. It's not close. He is the guy the Phillies need. But is Dave Dombrowski going to be aggressive enough to win a bidding war? History would tell you yes. Recent history with the Phillies would tell you no. Which history do you believe? We're going to find out in 2 days, because the trade deadline, July 31st, 6 p.m. It's coming, folks. We are just 48 hours away from the trade deadline while I'm recording this. So cross your fingers and hope, and we will see. But those are two very interesting names, one that I definitely don't want, one that I definitely do want, talking about Luis Robert and Eugenio Suarez, respectively. Coming up next, let's take a look at Game 2 between the Phils and the Sox and how the Phillies bounce back. A lot on Jesus Luzardo's plate. Does he have one of his good starts in him? Well, you better hope he does, because the Phils really need this game. We'll talk about it as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, so Game 2 against the White Sox. This is a game that the Philadelphia Phillies, they just have to find a way to win. I don't care if it's ugly, pretty, whatever. You don't have to win by 10. You could win by 1, but you better not lose back-to-back games to the White Sox. The Phils are favored in this game on the money line. They're minus 180. They got a 54.5% chance, according to ESPN Matchup Predictor, the analytics that they use. They should be favored over the White Sox. They probably should be by more, but who knows what Jesus Luzardo is at this point. He's 8-5 with a 4.58 ERA. He's had some of the best starts of the year for the Phillies. He's had some of the worst starts of the year for the Phillies. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Man, I feel like Charles Dickens out here. But when you look at what he can bring when he's at his best, he's great. And his strikeout stuff is still awesome, right? 136 Ks and 114 innings pitched. The problem is when he gives up contact, he gives up contact. It's also something where we're going to have to watch Luzardo when a runner gets to second base, how he handles throwing from the stretch with his new hiding of his pitches that he developed after getting shelled earlier this year. That's been the sticking point from him. The windup, fine. The stretch, no bueno. So we will see how that goes. And he's facing off against a guy with one of the great names in baseball, Johnny Cannon. Oh, my God. If I was a hitter and I saw that the guy that we're facing, his name is Johnny Cannon, like, we could be in for a long day. Now, the good news is he's not that good. He's 4-7 with a 4.48 ERA. He's only struck out 72 and 88 in the third innings pitch. So just like most of the White Sox starters, you're not going to see major strikeout numbers. You can put the ball in play off these guys. You can find a way to get on base against these guys, right? And that's a good thing for a Phillies lineup that may need to cut down their approach a little bit and just, hey, put the ball in play. They're guys that are easy to put the ball in play against. Cannon, he's given up 94 hits in those 88 in the third inning. So his whip 1.4, it's up there. He doesn't walk many. He's only walked 30 and 88 in the third inning. So you don't really have to worry about that, because the other thing that's surprising, so Luzardo has given up a good number of home runs, it feels like, this year. He's only given up 10. I would have guessed it would have been more. Cannon's given up 14 in significantly less innings. So the long ball is hurting. And that could be something that the Phillies look to use to their advantage. But it goes back to this whole idea of Don't chase the long ball and ruin the approach that I've really, really liked this year that has been different from previous years. I don't want to see the Phillies slip back into the issues of the past, right? That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in them just continuing to put together good at-bats, and if you run into one, you run into one. And if we have to have the conversation about, well, where's their power? I'd rather have that than, well, why are they losing to the White Sox? One of those conversations feels a little bit more fun to have. Here's the Phil's lineup. It is already out. Nothing crazy with this lineup. Trey Turner's leading off. Kyle Schwarber batting second. Bryce Harper batting third. JT Realmuto batting cleanup. Nick Castellanos in the 5-hole. Brandon Marsh, 6th. Max Kepler, 7th. Otto Kemp, 8th at third base. Bryson Stott, 9th. It is a righty on the mound in Johnny Cannon, so you knew they were going to go with the typical lefty lineup. Marsh has been swinging it well lately, so nice to see. JT is going through a bit of a colder stretch, but we'll see if he heats back up again. I would expect either Kyle Schwarber or Bryce Harper to go yard tonight. And you know what? I'm going to throw this out here too. I just get the vibe. I think Trey Turner might take one out of the yard tonight. I think the Phillies have a strong offensive night. I think if you score 5, ball game. I think if you score 4, could be a little bit sketchy, but 5 runs is the mark to get to tonight, in my opinion, because I don't think the White Sox are going to score more than that, even if Luzardo doesn't have his best stuff. They're just not that good of a team. I mean, I'm just looking at the White Sox lineup, right, and what they're hitting right now. 253, 244, 271, 230, 205. That's Luis Robert Jr., by the way, if you want to trade for him. 273, 271, 217, 276. I mean, they got a couple of guys who are in those low 270 marks, but only 4 of them. And the rest of the lineup is all like 250 or below. It's not a great lineup. They're not great hitters. They don't have a lot of power. They only have 2 guys with double-digit home runs in this entire lineup. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about giving up the long ball unless you're facing Vargas or Robert. And we know Robert went yard last night. But this is what's so tough about losing games to the White Sox and then previewing the next game. From my perspective, you look at everything that this White Sox team has and you say they should never, ever beat the Phillies. Like you can't even imagine a situation. It would have to be Sanchez has a really rough start. The offense has a bad approach. You don't really show off the power. You get like 6 hits and you don't cash in when the runners in scoring position. The defense makes some mistakes. Oh, wait. It sounds like last night's game. Yeah, I know. I don't really want to go through that again. So hopefully they do not. Something I want you to keep in mind in this White Sox series as well. In addition to watching Luzardo from the stretch tonight, in addition to watching Luis Robert and what he's able to do. And maybe tonight he gives you an example of why you don't want to trade for him. At least that's my opinion. I want you to keep this in mind. Nothing that happens in the series against the White Sox is going to affect how Dave Dombrowski handles the trade deadline. We have come this far this season. We have a pretty darn good idea of who the Philadelphia Phillies are, right? And what they're not. They're not a true bona fide World Series contender right now without bullpen improvements, some type of lineup improvement. They don't have the horses. They're not far off, and there are a lot of teams right in that camp because other teams are going to improve as well. But we know over the course of how many games have they played? 106 games the Philadelphia Phillies have played so far this year. We know that they are good enough to be buyers, right? And we know that they could be really good with the right purchases. And whether they win or lose tonight against the White Sox, I know we're going to have to wear it on the radio tomorrow. I'm going to have to be mad on the podcast tomorrow if they lose to the White Sox. But at the end of the day, don't be doing the whole, well, now they can't, you got to sell, trade Schwarber, trade Suarez, trade Realmuto. Everybody's on an expiring contract. You lost 2 games to the White Sox. No, I need you guys to hold it together until 6 p.m. on Thursday. And then, guess what? If Dave Dombrowski doesn't make the moves he needs to, we will have the whole rest of the season and a lot longer than that, off season, years to come, to be ticked off about it. But for now, I need y'all to stay strong out there. We're almost to the point where we know what the final form of this Phillies team is going to be. And even then, might have some call-ups. You never know. Getting guys back from injury, getting a guy back from suspension. There's a lot of things still to change for this Phillies team. So keep an eye on the trade rumors. We'll keep you updated on it here on Locked On Phillies. And tomorrow, it will be trade deadline eve. So we're going to run through a lot of different scenarios for other teams that we haven't talked about yet, including the Pirates, the A's. There's other teams to focus on that have valuable stuff for the Phillies. So we'll get into that as far as reactions concerned to game 2. We'll do that and preview game 3. But that's all in tomorrow's episode. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that helps you out, helps us out. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.